My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a senior program manager in Office 365 engineering, so I'm not actually from the marketing. I'm here to help you guys. I'm not here to sell, which is a good thing. So that's the reason why I might be slightly more honest than Jeremy is. No, just kidding. He's hopefully not in the audience. Good. I used to be a SharePoint consultant, actually 8 years working with the customers, and then last July or June I moved actually part of the Redmond organization. I am though a slightly different person because they established me an own cost center in Finland, which is pretty cool. So I didn't need to have to move over to the Redmond, which was really great. If you have any questions related on whatever we go through today or tomorrow or previous days, please go to Office 365 Developer Patterns and Practices Yammer group. Even though my email is over there, my inbox is completely corrupted. So sending an email to me and asking questions is not the wise thing to do. Please go to AKMS Office Dev PnP Yammer, which is an extremely active Yammer group. And it actually shows how Yammer can be productive. Quite often the Yammer groups are pretty, not that active, but that one is, and people are helping each other. So please go there with any of the questions. Anyway, today we're going to talk about site provisioning, because site provisioning is really the core and the heart of SharePoint when you think of it. Every single thing in SharePoint starts from the fact that you have a site. And then you start thinking, how can I modify the site? How can I apply branding to the site? How can I do other settings within the site? How can I enhance the experience of a business user in a way that whenever a site is created, they don't have to do any modifications, there's templates. And that's the site templates and web templates and whatever functionalities we've been doing. And today we're going to concentrate on that topic slightly more in a different way. We're looking at that from an app model perspective. What if we don't do feature XMLs? What if we don't do full source code, running code within the server side? What if we actually move away from that freaking difficult XML? Well, I do know that XML as well, but it's slightly difficult to explain a non-SharePoint person how that XML actually works. And how we can build a solution where the business user is the one who is still creating the template. And you don't necessarily have to have a complex code written. So let's talk about those options today. So we're going to concentrate obviously site provisioning with CSOM or REST. I'm always using a CSOM there because I'm not that RESTful guy. I'm more a CSOM person. But obviously the same functionalities works within the REST API side pretty much. All of the demos what we do today are part of the Patterns and Practices guidance, but the key demo today, which I'm super proud, is the Patterns and Practices provisioning engine, because it actually shows an awesome story related on how you can build templates as a business user using a browser and use that as the template for all of the new sites, which is created within your tenant. And that's a super, super mind-blowing scenario. And it's all available for you to download in the certain locations. So we're going to talk about those ones. And then also the final topic is the hybrid provisioning. So let's think about the fact that how do we provision sites in a hybrid way. We will most likely have some native capabilities for the hybrid provisioning in the upcoming SharePoint 2016 server. I'm not actually super confirmed of what will be there and what's not. But today we're going to do it upside down. We're going to do it in a way that we actually run the application in Microsoft Azure in the cloud, and then we provision sites to on-premises. So that you don't have to have any app infrastructure in the on-premises, which is quite often the case, what people are asking. Why do I always need to have this additional service and provider-hosted application? What if we flip that thing upside down? Let's run the applications and SharePoint apps in the Azure and provision stuff to on-premises. And let's think about what it actually means and what does it actually requires. Because it doesn't require things which people quite often start thinking about. But let's come back to that one in a final demo as well. Good. Anyway, the key point of the session and the key point where we're moving is that we're actually moving away from the feature framework. We're gradually taking that step away from the XML-based provisioning. We are, as a SharePoint developers, I'm an old school SharePoint full source code developer, so we are so used to creating those Sonnet XML files, which are defining what kind of sites are, what are those features which are activated. But at the same time, those templates are not that flexible. The problem with these templates, I'm going to explain that in details, is that they don't actually keep up with all the updates what we're bringing into Office 365. So we're introducing all the additional innovation in the out-of-the-box theme sites. But if you have saved a site as a template, that's not actually reflected with all of those changes. And that's not a good thing. And that's why we want to resolve this issue by using then an alternative approach for these templates. So we're going to actually use remote APIs to create this. And if you are really into this site provisioning, I'm skipping really, I want to concentrate on the CSOM-based app model templating, but if you're really into that, this templating model, you absolutely know that what is a web template. Web template is something where you actually create an unmatched XML file. You define that what features will be activated whenever the site is actually created. And then you deploy that as a sandbox solution in the cloud or as a full-source solution in the on-premises. And that was a really cool innovation in SharePoint 2010. That was a super innovation because we could do additional things. And there was this one blog post written by one person, which was like 45 pages explaining how the web templates truly work. And it actually has been highly successful. It was much better than site definitions, at least. But now the thing is that we're moving away from that one as well. We're moving away to the direction where we have those better remote APIs, and we can truly provision those sites using code and take advantage of that one. Because one of the key points also is that you can actually debug code. You cannot debug XML. That's pretty much impossible. Well, you can, but it doesn't actually, you can't really step through the steps within the XML-based provisioning. And I'm going to actually explain this challenge. This is a highly technical slide. If you're not in the 300 level of the web templates, you probably don't quite get it. But I want to make sure that we understand what's the problem with the web templates, because we know that a lot of people are still using them. Essentially, we create a web template by copying an out-of-the-box unmatched XML file. Unmatched XML file is the one which is defining in XML format what kind of things are being provisioned whenever a site is actually created. We take an unmatched XML file, like an out-of-the-box theme unmatched XML file. We copy that one. So it's now my custom template. Then the reality is that we, as in the Microsoft, we do innovation all the time on top of the out-of-the-box theme side. And the reality is that right now, if you go and have a look on what kind of features are getting activated with an out-of-the-box theme side, it's actually quite a lot of stuff. And additional stuff, which we're innovating and adding as a stapled feature to the out-of-the-box theme side all the time. And that's the problem, actually. The problem is that your template is a copy from the out-of-the-box theme site whenever you actually created that template. And it's not keeping up with all the innovation what we're introducing. So therefore, your template is falling behind. And essentially, if somebody is creating out-of-the-box theme site, you will get a humongous amount of cool stuff. And whenever they're using your template, you're not necessarily getting that. That's the core problem. And it's absolutely fair comment. Somebody has said, but that's a design flaw within the SharePoint. Yes, we know. It is kind of a design flaw within the SharePoint, that it doesn't work natively in the best possible way. But it is what it is. I'm here to help you and explain how it works and trying to help you to the right direction. In a longer term, we are absolutely trying to resolve all of these issues, but it takes time. We don't have, unfortunately, infinite resources either. Which is a common mistake when people start thinking about the Microsoft. But anyway, you probably got the issue related on the template and the innovations, and your template is not keeping up. So in the case of your template, you would have to go and update those template files. The same applies when you do a save site as a template, as a UI end-user operation. Because we will actually take that unmatched XML, the status of the site, and we will save that as unmatched XML. Essentially doing the web template on fly. And that's then from that moment what the site had. Now, if you use that template for new sites, those sites will be looking like your template, not like the out-of-the-box theme site, which might be evolving faster to the innovation what we're doing there. And that's the problem. And hopefully I'm able to explain that in an understandable way, regardless of my Finglish. That jokes always works. I know. Anyway, so we're moving into the SharePoint remote provisioning. And SharePoint remote provisioning, what it means is that we take advantage of the remote APIs. It might be CSOM, it might be web services, it might be RESTful interfaces. And essentially, we will do the model in a way that we run the code outside of the SharePoint. And then we create the site collection using the CSOM. We are pushing the needed assets. We're activating the needed features. And then we're pushing, for example, if you want a custom master pages and all of those needed settings using remote APIs to the site. And that's essentially the initial thinking. And I'm going to show a slightly more interesting scenario slightly later within the presentation as well. But we run the things remotely. How do you configure that provisioning engine? That's then a debatable thing. It might be actually still XML. but it's not SharePoint XML, it's your engine XML. And it's your engine's own templating system. And we do have a standardized XML coming up. Well, we do have a community work being done by Victor Villen and Erwin van Hoonen and Paolo Piorsi and so on, related on the schema standardization for the remote APIs as well, which is a really brilliant thing. But essentially, what we do, like mentioned, we remotely create the sites using those remote APIs. And the answer is, for the remote feature framework discussion, we are seriously looking away, like mentioned a few times already, moving away from that complex XML. So that we're kind of reducing also let's say, the hurdle to learn how to do SharePoint development. The new developers can take advantage of the APIs. They don't need to really worry about the internals of the XML. To be fair, even though if you are a really hardcore feature or XML guru in the SharePoint area, it's still a highly valuable skill. Because, for example, in my work, what I do with the customers, I really need to understand what happens on the other side, regardless that am I using XML or am I using remote APIs. Because the functionality is still the same. Good. This is just a summary slide when we think through individual provisioning types. I didn't want to go through all of this as an intro, but when you think about the individual different kind of ways of provisioning SharePoint sites, we have the site definition, something which we introduced properly in 2007. We created on it XML, but it's actually the problem with the site definitions is that it requires farm solutions. You cannot run that in a Office 365, and you cannot easily actually update the ONET XML. To be fair, the flexibility of that approach is enormous, because you can actually own the whole provisioning thingy. But the costs in a short and long-term impact is pretty high, because there's an impact for your site and there's an impact for the deployment. You need to maintain that in a certain way, that ONET XML file. Then we introduced, well, in the UI side, then we had the site template. That's the thing where the end user goes and saves site as a template. Super capability, if it actually works. Because there's some reliability issues depending on what features have been activated. Is the publishing feature activated in the site? Are you saving a subsite? Are you saving a root site? There's different things what actually happens. Somebody, again, it's an absolutely fair comment. Why are we exposing that functionality if it's not working properly? Which is an absolutely fair comment. So is the answer then that we should actually get rid of the whole thing? And then at that point, people are like, no, fix it. But the problem is actually that there's so many things related on that functionality that I'm not promising that will fix the save site as a template functionality. It's a highly complex thing. The problem, there's also other problems with the site template. It doesn't work with the publishing sites, and it can't really control all of the things. So the options are fair. Cost impact is slightly smaller, but the longer-term impact is actually bigger. Then we introduced the web templates, which was a really cool thing in 2010. You were able to actually take an ownership of and create those ONET XMLs by yourself. It's pretty much the combination of the site definitions and site templates. The options were higher because the publishing features are supported, but then there was things like variations, which you couldn't not do with the web templates. And you couldn't build that multilingual, hierarchical copy with variations with web templates. If we think about other options, we have the server-side option. That's kind of whatever you want. The flexibility is enormous. There's site provisioning providers. I don't know how many of you actually know what is a site provisioning provider, but you could actually steal the whole and own the whole site provisioning engine. Essentially, site provisioning provider is an API within the server side where if end user goes and selects a template, it will just run your code, which is a super cool thing. The problem is that you cannot move that to Office 365. And you're still dependent on other things. So the support in a cloud, it doesn't exist. And that might actually hurt you in a longer run. And now when you think about what we recommend is the remote provisioning. So using CSOM, using remote APIs, using all of these new APIs, which we are evolving all the time, to actually provision the sites and template and configure the sites. The downside of this one is, though, that you need to write some code. Or somebody needs to write some code. And somebody needs to manage or maintain the code. The code itself could be actually, though, also PowerShell. So you can do pretty much the remote provisioning in multiple different ways. You can run JavaScript even to provision sites or subsites in the site collection, which is pretty cool. So let's actually move on that topic. So site provisioning with app model. And Essentially, like mentioned, what we do is that we use the remote APIs in the Office 365. That capability has been there since the dawn of SharePoint 2013 version in the cloud. In on-premises, we released that capability to be supported in April CU in 2014. It's already 1 year ago. There's a detailed guidance within my blog post, which is essentially saying what do you need to do to enable CSOM-based site collection creation in on-premises. There's certain steps to make sure that those things actually work. And after that, you're able to then write code, which is creating site collections, and you don't actually need to do any deployment of feature XMLs and so on. And when we kind of have one additional step on that one is then we really want to kind of evolve the site provisioning thingy. And this is kind of the, let's say, de facto model, what we recommend for the Office 365. I'm going to also show a demo which is showing why we want to do asynchronous site provisioning within the cloud. End user goes to a UI. End user goes somewhere we're exposing individual templates. And these templates doesn't have to be team site and community sites and whatever options. They might be super team site, Uber team site, and the normal team site. But then it's up to the selection and up to the code what it actually do based on the selection. So it's not about offering out-of-the-box templates, it's about offering abstract templates. The end user selects there an Uber team site. It could be that we require approval of those requests. We could store that request, for example, in a SharePoint list. We might have an approval process, approval workflow in the list. Whenever that things are approved, there's a web job or some sort of a scheduled job which is checking those requests within the queue. Oh, there's a request which has been requested and it's approved. Let's actually create the site. And that's when we run the CSOM code, we apply the needed configurations, we create the content types and site columns and branding and all of those things using the CSOM. And after that, we send an email for the requester. Here we go. Here's your site collection. Have fun. You're ready to go. The reason, obviously, that why we want to do this asynchronously is that we don't want to steal the end user's browser because you don't want to have that endless GIF animation saying they're working on it, because the site collection creation takes quite a long time. And that's the reason why we need to have some intelligence on the queuing mechanisms, and I'm going to explain that slightly more detailed slightly later on the presentation. Good. One of the key points before we go to the demos and go to more detailed on the code and how do we actually make these things happen and how do we make it end-user understandable capability as well. How we need to approach the site provisioning in the cloud is that we always start with an out-of-the-box site. We always start with an out-of-the-box team site or a publishing site. That would be my recommendation, because out-of-the-box team site, that has a future. That's like 100% sure that we're never going to take an out-of-the-box team site away. If you use a random other templates, who knows? Every now and then with the major releases, we're actually reducing the amount of templates what I'll be supporting. So I would always actually start from team site, unless you're doing a publishing site. So I would actually start in the publishing site template. So we provision always a team site, out-of-the-box team site. But then the question is, how do I offer those alternative templates? Well, based on the end-user selection, we then actually specialize that out-of-the-box team site with the branding and with the site collections, site columns and content types and all of those things. Then we run that additional piece of code, which is actually making that team site to be relevant for this particular deployment. The branding is typically one thing, whatever needs to be done, providing that information architecture within the site. Always start with an out-of-the-box thing. So, and the following question what people are then asking, well, does it actually mean that I need to write at this humongous amount of code to make this happen? Well, the answer is no. You can actually do the whole thinking using PowerShell as well. We have a powerful PowerShell script, and within 6 lines of code, you're able to, for example, provision a site collection, then apply a custom branding on top of it. So it doesn't mean that you need to absolutely have an Azure installation or Azure tenant somewhere running, and then you're applying that thing. At the same time, it might be a term called Mechanical Turk. You're calling somebody and saying, give me a new site collection. What the somebody is doing, it's doing what you can actually code or script as well. It creates the site collection, and then it applies those needed settings. But is it actually worthwhile? Who knows? Is it actually worth the investment? Probably not. You probably want to make actually some sort of automation, some sort of an engine available which will apply those needed configuration. It depends obviously on the overall cost thinking. Let's have a quick first demo on the site collection provisioning. So this is a relatively simple demo. It just shows the approach, how do we actually create those site collection. This is one of our patterns and practices samples, and it's a provisioning site collection creation. It's really simple provider-hosted application, which only exposes a UI where people can go and request a site. And that then is it's a self-service site collection creation functionality. So I'm going to do an F5. I'm going to show you how it actually works. We're not going to wait the site collection to be created because we don't actually know how long it's going to take in the cloud because it's an asynchronous creation of the site collection. But let's quickly have a look on the code so you'll understand the basics and the thinking, how do we approach the creation of these things before we go to much more, let's say, complex scenarios. Doing an F5, it deploys that application to the Office 365, crossing fingers that we don't have any Office 365 so network issues. Seems to be working relatively good. Installation in progress, and it starts right about now. Come on. And while we're waiting, let me dance. So what happens now is that Visual Studio is compiling the application and it's deploying that to the cloud, and it starts attaching the debugging on the app itself, and then we're able to actually show how things work if we can get that application to be deployed. And we should be fine in a matter of seconds. We should be. Any good questions at this time? Here we go.
So for site collection provisioning, most of my clients, these SharePoint admins actually provision site collection through the admin center, and then we provide site provisioning for subsites to end users. So then if we roll out this mechanism, how does it compare against, well, creating site collection from the admin center?
Good question. So the question is okay, comparing this self-service site collection creation, this is now essentially showing, whoa, interesting. Did we completely lost connectivity? Whoa. Let's do it one more time. So the question is that if I'm actually in a central admin and somebody manually creates the site collection and then you apply those modifications on top of it, what's the difference between the self-service site collection creation? Well, actually nothing, really, when you think of it. The self-service site collection creation might be needed if your business requirements apply that. If you want to provide that kind of a capability for your end users and business users. And if you want that to be an email-based provisioning, then it's the mechanical Turk approach, essentially. You're sending somebody an email, somebody creates a site collection, and then you might apply the scripts which are then modifying that site to be based on the business requirements. There we go. That was just a small hiccup. So I'm going to actually quickly press the F5 one more time. Now it doesn't take that long. Everything is already set up. It's going to just spin up a IE. And it's going to skip every single other step. Deploy succeeded, and this time the IE is coming up relatively fast. And there's our site, there's our application. And this time it's a relatively simple application. So this is just a form where the business user can go and request a new site collection. Pretty typical business scenario. But like with the question, you can absolutely do this manual as well. You might have some sort of a email sending process, and then the administrator is actually creating the site itself. In my case, I'm selecting whatever template I want. Let's do an Uber team. Let's call this as Evo. I can provide the URL. There's probably some sort of a managed path there, which my code is now missing, so don't worry about that one. When I'm clicking the UI, it's really working hard on it. What's going to happen is I'm going to show you this one in code, so we get to the same level before we go to those slightly more complex scenarios. So what I'm doing essentially in the code is that I'm storing the current user's email. That's what I'm using for selecting or setting the site collection owner for the newly created site collection. And then I'm taking advantage of a app-only access token. Cool. and we have a small additional hiccup to that, missing the additional first step. Give me 1 second, I'm going to fix this one. And this is actually a good one. Quite often when you have these kind of hiccups and things, at this point people get, the SharePoint app development, I hate it. The only thing what you need to do, because that's a security issue, I don't know actually what happens. To be honest, what happens was that my initial deployment failed and the trusting didn't happen. So the easiest way to fix this one, and this is actually a really nice tip, change the version. 1 to 0 to 1, because this will now force that trusting icon to be asked one more time, so that I can grant the right permissions for this site collection, this app. Now it's going to download and upload the app quickly, but as we can see from the output as well, it actually changed also the app ID. And this is now forcing the trust icon or trust UI to be shown to me, so I can give this app the right permissions. But I do know that if you are facing these issues every now and then, it's super frustrating when you're getting random permission things and you can't just figure out what's actually happening. So trust it. Now we have the application again properly running. There we go. Give it a name, give it a URL, clicking to create, and there we go. Really working hard on it. You can kind of figure it out that we actually overrode that UI. I'm going to do an F5. What's happening here is that we are doing an app-only access token. So we are overriding my personal permissions. I'm not interested about the end user's permission. I'm just interested about the app's permission. We're using the app-only token, and therefore the end user permissions are not relevant. So and now the app itself can actually create the site collection, and it's taking advantage of the site creation properties object, which is part of the tenant client-side object model. We are essentially giving a URL, we are giving who's the site collection owner, give it a title, and what is the template. In this case, it's an STS0. And then I'm doing an F5. And what's now happening is that the actual site collection creation starts working. It's an asynchronous process because it's a cloud. So essentially, we have here this while loop, which is checking whenever the site collection is truly completed. The problem from my end user perspective, because this is not an asynchronous, is this one. Now the end user's attention and the browser has been stolen. So the end user has to wait there and wait for the site collection to be actually created. That's not an optimal thing. So that's the reason why we should be always thinking a synchronous way of doing this. I'm going to show that one in practice in a second. The other thing what we're showing in this code is the fact that whenever the site collection actually has created, then we start specializing that site collection. So in this particular case, we're doing nothing more than actually setting the theme based on a name. So we're adding that site collection with an orange theme. That's a really simple thing. But essentially, we're using out-of-the-box theme and setting that to the site. Just as well, I could write code where I'm creating the needed site collection, site columns and content types and all of the libraries and so on, which though requires some additional code. Let's switch back on the slide so we are able to see the following steps. The kind of a logical following step is then, okay, now we can create site collections using CSOM. What about subsites? Because that's actually a really common question as well. So I need to create a custom templates in a subsite as well. It's actually really stupid functionality when you think of it. When a person goes to the out-of-the-box theme sites and starts creating a subsite, we are offering by default for things like enterprise search. That's just stupid because you cannot actually create enterprise search under a random theme site. And now the following question is, how do I actually make my custom templates to be available within the subsite creation? And how we do that is by we steal actually, or we take an ownership of that new subsite link. So essentially, whenever the end user clicks that new subsite link, we'll redirect the end user to our app, even though the end user doesn't necessarily understand that that's actually happening. And then we offer those random templates, whatever we want to offer, Contoso team, Super team, Uber team, whatever we want to do. And then we take full ownership of that creation of the site. Again, in the same way, we create a subsite using CSOM, using the web creation object, and in the CSOM or REST, and then we apply those settings, and that will actually create us a new subsite underneath the site collection. It's a relatively simple thing, also to take an ownership of that link. But we need to do some clever things whenever we provision the sites to be able to do that. And let's actually have a look on that one as well. It's much more, let's say, sexier demo, if nothing else, because it actually has a custom branding and it doesn't take a humongous amount of time to do. So I'm going to switch on that demo. I'm going to actually stop this one. I'm not even interested when the site collection creation ends. And I'm going to free up some memory. There's my site creation. This one should be much more faster to deploy. And then I'm also explaining how we actually steal that Subsite creation functionality. I just want to do this one by one. This is a provisioning Subsite creation sample, one of the patterns and practices example. If you go to the AKA MS Office Dev PMP, and you can absolutely find all of this code available in the site. Give it the right permissions. The UI is exactly the same. What we're doing here is that we're creating a subsite. I started with an app, but I will create a one site, and after that I'll show you how we steal the subsite creation. Because in reality, people don't go to this app as an app itself. So give me 1 second. Let's call this Evo. And the URL is Evo, so it's going to be underneath my dev site collection. Let's create that site. It's going to take a while, and it's really working hard on it. And once again, it's roughly, I would say, 20 to 30 seconds, so that's not too far. But what's going to happen is that it's now creating that new site. We can actually go and have a look on the code while it's doing that, just to save some time. So what's happening is that it's creating that subsite in the site collection. And at the same time when it's doing that, it starts applying customizations there as well. So let me go here. There we go. So we're taking advantage of the web creation information object. We create a site based on the template selection. Is it a theme site? Is it a whatever out-of-the-box site? We're adding description, title, what was the URL, and so on. We execute that within the code, and after that we start adding those customizations. Whatever is actually your template. How do you specialize that template selection based on the business requirements? First of all, we are adding a JS link. I'm going to explain this in a second using the UI because it's slightly more difficult to understand. Then we do also apply a custom theme. So what we do is that we upload a custom theme and branding elements to the newly created site or the site collection, and we apply that custom theme to the site itself. And then we could do something like adding the logo to the site. There we're actually uploading and adding the logo to the site, and we would be able to do whatever additional things needed. We're just using the code to actually create the site rather than using an XML. And there's our site. There's our Evo site, and it's looking already branded. Not that super branded site, but there's a custom theme, there's a custom background. And what was the interesting part now is that we did that JavaScript injection, which actually is taking ownership of that subsite creation. So now if an end user goes here and clicks this new subsite link, we will be redirected actually to our app. Oh, we have a JavaScript, out-of-the-box JavaScript error. Don't worry about that one. But what's happening? There we go. So we are essentially taking an ownership of the link. Whenever the end user clicks that link, it's actually our app which we're showing for the end user. So therefore, we again take an ownership of the creation of the subsites. And therefore, we again are able to apply whatever needed on the site itself. And just quickly going through that one, if you joined me on Monday, yesterday we did a quick demo on this one as well. But what actually happens is that as part of the site provisioning, we are adding we're taking advantage of JavaScript embedding capability, where we are adding a new custom action in the custom action collection of the site, or in the web level actually. And what that means is that as part of the rendering of the UI, we are actually rendering one additional JavaScript. And you can easily have a look on that one using the F12 if needed. And if I remember correctly, the UI, if I remember the JavaScript name, I don't. Oh, there it is, custom injected.js. We essentially add this one in the web.user custom action collection. And what it means is that as part of any single page I'm actually on the site, this JavaScript will be executed as well. And the JavaScript is the one which is doing the magic. And I'm going to open up the JavaScript actually in Visual Studio, so I'm able to show you and zoom that slightly better, so you are able to understand what's actually happening. It's in the resources and custom injected JavaScript. And there we go. We have some additional code which is taking care of the minimal download strategy for the JavaScript. But what we're doing is that we're essentially looking that if I'm in the Subsite, sorry, in the site content link, site content page, is the create new site link present on the page, and I'm updating that to point to my app. In my code right now, I'm just actually updating that to my local host. In the real world, it would be absolutely updated to point to an application in the Microsoft Azure or in the on-premises environment. And you would probably want to have that URL configurable, not hard-coded within the JavaScript. But it's showing the pattern and showing the thinking, because now we own the Subsite creation as well, which is pretty cool. Good. Moving on things, let's go slightly more interesting topics and slightly more jaw-dropping. Those are simple stuff. I think the following thing is much more interesting. So as part of the work what we do in the patterns and practices, we've come up with a patterns and practices provisioning engine. Because obviously whenever we show the story, people are like, well, I need to write some code, quite a lot of code. Would it be cool if we wouldn't have to actually write code at all? Or would it be cool if we would have a community-owned, community-driven engine what everybody could actually use and they could contribute back? Open source engine to remotely provision those sites and configure the sites. Oh, that's a great idea. And then we started actually working on that one. So now the business case is actually slightly more interesting. We have end users. We have business end users, business owners. They could be individual organizational persons. So for example, a services has a dedicated person, and let's say HR has a dedicated person. They are actually using browser to create sites and modify sites. So there's a specific sites in the URL, for let's say /site/template site, where the business user goes and uses browser to actually modify the site itself. Well, that's the typical requirement. That's what the end users want to do and the business users want to do. But then whenever the actual end user wants to create a new site or site collection, what we do is that we show those options, again, those templates. But the engine itself actually goes and checks what is the current setup for example, HR organization sites, how the business user has actually created the site collection, what kind of modifications there are in the sites, branding, site columns, content types, libraries, and so on. And the engine actually extracts all of those changes and creates a new site collection and applies all of the changes on top of that. So essentially, now we don't have to have any kind of a code or XML or anything which is actually telling what's the template is all about. The template is drawn and maintained and updated by the business users by using a browser. Isn't that pretty cool? And do we actually have this working? And yes, we do, which is a super, super thing. So now, based on the end user selection, it would be a business case, for example, that if I'm from HR, if I'm from R&D, it's dynamically taking the template based on the R&D selected template. If I'm from somewhere else, or maybe based on my selection, it's taking the differences in a different site. But it's a super, super capability when you think of it. And so let's actually have a look on this one. First, from a code perspective, I'm going to step through the steps and how easy this is using the PnP engine right now, and then I'm going to show the actual demo how it actually works. Essentially, we're able to extract individual changes which have been applied on top of the team site, existing site in an existing URL. The business user has gone and modified the site, created libraries, associated content types, and all of those. We're able to extract all of those changes to a domain object by using a single line of code after you have added a reference to our PnP core component. We're running a CTX context web get provisioning template. That code will actually go through that site and compare the site to out-of-the-box team site. And it will figure out, oh, that's a change, oh, that's a change, oh, that's a change, and it will store that to a business object. Then with that business object, we're able to save that to some location. If we want, we're able to serialize that in an XML format and save that to SharePoint library or in the Azure Blob Store or in a file system, if we want. You don't have to do this, but it's a cool thing what you can do. And like mentioned, there's different connectors for different location. Is it in an Azure Blob Store? Is it in a file system? Is it in a SharePoint? So we're able to actually take that diff file, XML file, and store that in a SharePoint library from an existing site. But the most coolest thing is then that we are able to create a new site collection, and then we're able to say all of those changes which the end user and business user actually did, apply those to my new site. And magically, poof, that newly created site is looking exactly the same as the template site. Just by running those few lines of code, which is pretty amazing when you think of it. Obviously, there's hundreds of lines of code and thinking behind of this, and there was a pretty big group of people actually writing the code for this engine. But it's a community-driven engine, and now we're able to actually take advantage of that one, and it's available for everybody to use. So let's actually have a look on this one, because this is the really cool stuff. The previous demos were pretty boring, so to say. So let's actually get rocking on something which is really, really cool stuff. This, by the way, the code what I'm right now showing, it's not quite yet in a GitHub. It's going to be there on the afternoon whenever I actually push the changes from my machine to the GitHub itself. Hopefully I'm not breaking my hard drive, by the way. That would be horrible. Luckily, we are actually recording this, so that's already a good start. I'm going to close that Subsite creation fellow because we're no longer interested on that one. Let's close that one. And then I'm going to do an F5 and explain what this fellow is doing. That's the right one. Good. So this is the thinking is exactly the same. So we start by site collection, self-service site collection creation. Absolutely, you can take advantage of the same engine using PowerShell. You don't have to do a web jobs or Azure or provider-hosted application. You just need to run the code against you need to be able to run the code. PowerShell is a completely supported into engine as well. So you're able to do the case where the administrator creates the sites, and then you apply the diff on top of the existing site using a PowerShell as well. But I'm not now using that using provider-hosted application model. So I'm going to actually create a title. I think we already stole to Evo. Let's create a title. Let's call this Vesa Site. If I can write, that was Finglish. Site Vesas. Why not? Okay, fine. Let's call that Evo Vesa. And I'm able to select the temp language if I want. I'm able to do all of that. But what's interesting is that I can actually, within this app, I'm able to now choose, do I want to create the new site based on existing template? Existing template which has been serialized as an XML. So essentially it has all the differences compared to the out-of-the-box team site serialized in the XML format. And I have a team and simplistic and Oslo. But what I'm actually more interested about is the template existing site-driven approach, where the business user can actually go and modify and create the site. And let's do a more small modification on this live site. So this is a site template site, and let's make sure that I'm not actually fooling you. So let's go to site content, and let's create something in here. Somebody said a library name. Stuff. Thank you. That's good enough. So let's create a new document library, because we haven't agreed anything, right? And I would not have known that you're saying stuff. So this is a magic trick. It feels like a magic trick. So I'm calling this as a stuff. So we're creating that additional library. I already actually has a few document libraries available. We have the project documents, and the project documents has the content types already associated to it, and there's additional things. There's a custom commands even in the ribbon. And there's a pretty obvious branding change within the site. So what the engine is now doing, I'm going to actually create, that was a Evo Vesa, and we're going to say that, create my site based on that existing site collection. And I'm going to click create. What's right now happening is that end user request is stored in the Azure storage queue. The reason why I'm doing that is that I don't want to steal my browser. So what I'm doing is that I'm adding a message in the Azure storage queue as hey, you engine there, create me a site collection. And what's going to happen is that that's in the queue, and that storage queue is then adding, first of all, I'm collecting all the information what the end user in the UI is selecting, and then I'm actually adding that as an object within the storage queue in the Azure storage queue. There will be a lot more documentation coming up on all of the stuff what I'm showing. But then I'm freeing up the end user. Essentially, I'm just saying, thank you, your request has been recorded. It's now in the storage queue, and we're going to create you the site collection after a while. We're going to send you an email whenever the site collection is created. Because like I said, the site collection creation in Office 365, it can take 2 minutes, 5, 10, who knows. It's a pretty long-running operation. And it depends on the farm performance thing. We're not going to wait that the whole time, so I'm going to continue demoing existing site and the difference what we're doing, and then we come back and see that my magical trip is also correctly done. So let's do this. I'm going to actually go and see, do I have an existing site? That's an out-of-the-box theme site. It doesn't have any custom branding on it, and it's an out-of-the-box theme site, which is a starting point. What I'm doing is that I'm bypassing that site collection creation step, and I'm running just the engine code in a second. So you can imagine that my engine code has, the site collection creation has been already created, and now we continue from the step that, okay, how do we take the existing site, and how do we apply the existing site modification on top of this out-of-the-box theme site? And for that one, within the code and within the demo, I'm going to actually shut down this one, because in the code, which will be in the GitHub later today, we have a helper project. And within the helper projects, these are essentially helper projects are helping to show or test functionalities. So now I can actually just execute the needed code using the helper project. And in the helper, this is a console application, relatively simple. And I'm going to run the instance. I'm going to double check that I have a breakpoint in the key part of the code. There we go. Just making sure that I actually have a where's my breakpoint? Where's my breakpoint? Clicking the wrong thing. And not a pig. Go to the definition. Here we go. There's my breakpoint. Good. I'm going to zoom in the font in a second. So, but what the application is doing, it is asking me two things. It's asking me what is the template site, so what is our source for the template itself. So I'm going to go to my browser and let's copy the source site. It seems to be that one. It's the Vesa J template site. And as mentioned, you might have multiple template sites. It's either my mouse or it's my head, which is working weirdly. Are you seeing this as well? No, just kidding. So I'm going to copy that, just making sure that I'm actually getting the right values. That's my template site. We were interested on getting that stuff document library applied to the other side. So I'm copying that URL, entering that to the console application. Right now it's a console application. It could be absolutely PowerShell. It could be absolutely whatever. There's my new site, which is created. That's the clean site collection. Now I'm saying my target site is that one. There we go. Start this on that one. My breakpoint is going to hit in a second. And this is just a few lines of code from a usage perspective. So the engine is actually really well implemented. In my code, first things what I'm doing is that I'm checking, are we actually extracting from the existing site? Or are we going to create based on an XML? In this particular case, we're extracting from the existing site. So what we're doing is that we're taking an instance or taking a connection to that template site, and it's a one extension method, get provisioning template from the existing site. And this takes a while, obviously, because it's scanning through that existing sites. It's connecting to the existing sites. It goes through and finds that the stuff document library has been created. It finds out that all of the other things has been created, the site columns and content types and so on. But in a few seconds, though, I'm actually getting a domain object, which is pretty cool. I'm getting an object because it's actually having all the diff compared to the out-of-the-box theme site. And it's coming. There we go. And if I actually have a look on this object right now, it's an object, I'm not going to zoom in too much, but essentially it has lists, and it has two lists and all of the information. It's extracted all of the changes from the existing site. And then the following step is essentially I'm saying, well, I have the connection to that target site. I have this template, or their engine, apply. And that was all the code what the community have to do from this moment forward to be able to extract and apply things from different sites. So now, after a while, I think it's 40 seconds, 45 seconds, depending again on the amount of customizations what we have on the domain object. We are now then applying all of the needed changes on the site. We can actually go, the site is not is absolutely available when we're doing this because we're using CSOM API. Just want to make sure that I'm actually going to the right site. Where is my browser? Way too many things open. There's my template, good. There's my new site, which I provided as a parameter. We should be able to see some changes already at this moment. It's still looking like a out-of-the-box theme site. Okay, it's not yet there. It's coming. It's still creating those things. It's accessing thing. Oh, there we go. Now we are able to see that the project documents suddenly reappeared on the left side because it's applying those modifications on the site itself. The next step will be obviously the stuff. So I'm not actually doing a faking it. There we go. There's stuff recreated there as well. And then it's applying all of the additional things. The applying of theme is that's a time-consuming operation. So that's the thing when it's actually taking quite a long time. The other stuff, it's actually created relatively fast. But what it has done now is created the site columns, content types, document libraries, and then it's moving to the branding section, and it's applying that composite look on top of the existing site as well. Press F5. It should be pretty soon yellow, and we should have a logo. It's actually the logo goes first, and then it gets to the yellow side. And then magically, the site looks exactly the same as the other one. Yes, question on the.
Is there anything you can't do? So can you apply features that are different between these sites?
The question is that can you apply features which have been activated on the source site? And the answer is yes, that's already completely supported. So it's extracting all the activated features from the site as well, and then it's applying them to the target site. And the follow-up question while we're waiting the things to change to the yellow.
Can you do it from your UAT URL through to your production URL?
Can you do this? That's an actually awesome question. Can you do this from the UAT or user acceptance testing or a development environment towards a production? Answer is yes, yes you can. And now the logo has been changed, and absolutely the engine is something what we are still working, but all of the basic scenarios already work. There are certain things like is there a humongous amount of content, it doesn't detect all of that stuff, but the engine is evolving all the time. And we're collecting feedback from the community. We are building this together with the community. Victor Villain has been involved, Erwin van Hoonen, MVP, Paolo Priorsi is involved, Frank Marasco in our site, Brian Micheli and me has been closely involved on creating the engine. It's a big team of people, and Bert Janssen as well. Big team of people, but we really want to make sure that everybody can contribute back, because that's a great point. You're able to actually take your existing dev site and apply the configuration on another site. And now the question is, wait, does this has anything to do with an app model in the first place? This is like super, super cool stuff. But in our case, the app model always means the remote APIs. So this is just taking advantage of the remote APIs and configurations. And to be honest on that, it's kind of a sidetrack. But this doesn't actually extract apps, because it cannot do that. Apps has to be installed on the target site. That's one thing to be aware. But it takes the configurations of the existing sites and applies them to the other side. And there's our new site. I just want to make sure also that the request what we actually added on the queue is also created, which I think we had a Evo Vesa created. What happened for that one, to quickly explaining the process, was that I actually created that storage queue entry that was catched by a web job. And in my web job logs in the Microsoft Azure, I'm able to see that within 5 minutes ago, there was a request coming to this web job, which is the asynchronous engine waiting within the Azure, those new site collections. And it actually got information like Evo Vesa as the URL. And it also got the template ID. I'm going to actually zoom into that one. Template ID is the template site. So the template site is pointing that URL. So now my web job is actually run on the background, and it created that site collection with the right settings. And let's make sure that that actually happened as well. Here we go. I'm going to refresh. I just want to make sure that where could I get that, the full address? The URL was Vesa, Evo Vesa. Okay, that's enough. Where did you come from? Coming to new site, I just want to make sure that we actually got the exact same result using that UI as well. And then I reapplied, I showed you the engine using a console application. That's the site Vesas. It was the weird name what I wrote there. We're able to see the stuff, we're able to see the branding, and all of that stuff work. Pretty cool, isn't it? Whoopee! This is the time when you're doing. Good. We have 5 minutes. One of the things what I quickly wanted to do is still in 5 minutes. I'm sorry for because that's super cool stuff. I'm quickly going to do also a hybrid story. And this was the final thing what I promised to show. There's going to be a really fast demo though. But what it means is that typically when we think about the hybrid, it's kind of a stupid. I showed you the thunder and then I'm continuing with another thing. But this is actually really cool stuff as well. The hybrid story, typically if we think about the hybrid site collection provisioning, we typically think about running an application in on-premises or in the server-side code in on-premises. And what will happen is that we're exposing that cloud as an option to provision stuff within the cloud, a new site collection. But now what we can do is turn this upside down. What we're able to do is that we take advantage of the service bus, Microsoft Azure service bus, and then we actually flip it. And we put the application running in Microsoft Azure. And from the Microsoft Azure, we can easily create site collections because that's what I did already quite a few times during the demos. But what's interesting about this is that service bus is giving us a tool and a channel with a trusted and in a secure way to communicate to on-premises without any exposed internet endpoints. What will essentially happen is that on-premises fellow, that on-premises, it could be a Windows service, is connecting one way to the Microsoft Azure. And it's essentially saying, do you have a message for me? Do you have a message for me? Do you have a message for me? Oh, you have a message for me. Then it's reading the message and it's operating. That's oversimplification what actually happens. But in my mind, that eases up understanding how those things actually work. And when that fellow is then getting the message, it's going to create the site collection and it's actually then creating the new thing on the other side. Really cool stuff. I'm going to quickly do a demo on this one just to show you that it actually works. 4 minutes, not a problem. So I'm going to actually spin up, hopefully the connectivity is good. And we are connected. I have a server, and I'm not kidding you, I have a physical server sitting in Helsinki right now in our Microsoft data center in Helsinki because I haven't had a time to transform all of my stuff to the Microsoft Azure. Just as well, it could be a Microsoft Azure-based VM. And then my connection is down. Unreal. Let's try it one more time. So I'm able to actually show this one. It's fine, my best demo already worked, so that's fine. If I'm failing one, that's not a major deal. Now there we go, that's fine. So let's try to get an access on my on-prem server. Looks bad. No. We do have this one also recorded, by the way. OK, fine. I'm not going to then wait for it. So I'm going to go AKMS Office Dev PNB videos. And you can actually come here. This is our Channel 9, Patterns and Practices Channel 9 Channel 9 landing page, where you're able to actually see a lot of the videos. And one of the videos is about the hybrid. And it's actually showing how that thing works. It's a 56 minutes. It's a long explanation of the code as well. In Finnish, I do apologize that. But it's actually showing what I was planning to show in practice, how you can, from on-premises, create those site collections, in the cloud, but create the site collections to the on-premises side. Just to save the time, let's not actually fight with the network connectivity. Anyway, that's all we're going to do today. I think we're running out of time anyway. But please go and AKMS Office Dev PNP. You will land to our dev.office.com site, the Patterns and Practices site. From there, you're able to find additional samples and stories and videos. The engine is already available. It's lacking documentation. The sample what I just showed today will be published on the GitHub later today. We do have Yammer site, we do have MSDN pages, the videos, and there's training as well, which will, by the way, will continue tomorrow on these topics as well. But thank you for your time, and hopefully the demo was convincing.